My boyfriend has lost his memory and doesn't remember who I am at all. I went to see him with a fruit basket, but he said that at the first sight of me, he felt annoyed. The car accident a week ago made him lose most of his memory. When he woke up, he didn't remember me. I cried by his bedside. He told me to go outside and make noise. I said we were about to get married. He said don't get married. That's just fine. Chase said that his amnesia is an opportunity given to him by God. Let him stay away from me, a woman he doesn't like at first sight, and there is no need to step into the grave of love again. I brought oranges you like to eat, Chase. I tried to enliven the atmosphere. He frowned at me. I don't like eating oranges. My hand, which was halfway through peeling, stopped awkwardly. In the past, Chase peeled oranges for me. When I asked him what fruit he liked, he would hold me and kiss the corner of my mouth. I like whatever Yvonne likes. Chase, why don't you want to get to know me? I wanted to make myself smile, but I just made a smile uglier than crying. Maybe if you get to know me, you will like. Is there any need? He sneered. The curved corner of his mouth was full of sarcasm. Yes, Chase has always been unfeeling to outsiders. Chase's friends also came to see him. I am not very popular with Chase's friends. Chase and I are actually not from the same world. They always say that I am climbing high and don't know what tricks I used to catch up with Chase. In fact, it was Chase who chased me. He blocked me in the corner and leaned down and said, Yvonne, are you willing to give me the rest of your life? Chase's best friend came to see him. They were talking in the ward. I stood there feeling a bit awkward. Finally, I had to leave the ward. Sister-in-law, have you had lunch? When his best friend came out, she closed the door and scratched her head and asked me. I shook my head. Sister-in-law should also remember to eat. Did you donate 400 milliliters of blood to Brother Chase that day? Buy some blood-enriching foods, like pig liver and so on. I hummed. There was silence between us again. The incandescent lamp coldly reflected the shadows on the wall. After a long time, he sighed. Sister-in-law, have you ever thought about what you should do if Brother Chase really can't remember anything? What should I do? I twirled the ring on my ring finger. It was given to me by Chase when he proposed to me. He put the ring in my birthday cake and I almost ate it. It seemed that I remembered that dim and bright night again. He was pressing against me and said that he was almost crazy about me. Now, he told me to stay away from him. Sister-in-law, I don't mean to say you are not good, but you also know that you and Brother Chase are not suitable originally. Alas? Why don't you? Impossible. I stood up and refuted him. Even I didn't know what I was angry about. Probably my eyes were red. He was startled by me. Why do you have to pester him? The best friend's indifferent eyes were plain and white, as if pitying or looking down on me who was struggling. I cooked fish soup for Chase and took it to him. What are you doing here? I never thought that one day I would be scolded by him. His cold eyes like a cold pool would look at me like this. I cooked fish for you. Yvonne, right? He suddenly called my name. I haven't heard him call me by my full name for a long time. He always calls me Yvonne, Yvonne, with a sticky and ambiguous voice full of lust. How much money do you want before you are willing to leave me? I opened my mouth and looked at him in disbelief. Don't be like this, Chase. I tugged at the corner of my mouth and wanted to smile at him, but I couldn't smile. Don't be angry. Don't drive me away. You said that you like me. Some words are stuck in my throat, but he just frowned tightly. Yvonne, I don't need you to come and see me. I put the cooked fish soup on his table and thought, is it because I look too aggressive that he has such a bad first impression of me? But these days I have tried my best to smile at him. I have never been so gentle to him before. Chase, I cooked it for a long time. Drink it while it's hot. After saying that, I left the ward. There was no one in the wobbly corridor. I slowly squatted down. My head was a bit dizzy. In fact, when I donated blood, the doctor reminded me that with my constitution, I shouldn't donate so much blood. But at that time, Chase was pushed into the emergency room and I couldn't take care of it. At a time when my mind was in a mess, I could still remember how good he had been to me. So good that even if I sneezed, he would hurriedly tuck me into the quilt. And this person now doesn't even want to give me a look. On the day Chase was discharged from the hospital, I still went to pick him up. The door was slightly ajar and not closed. Voices of him and his best friend came from inside. Don't you notify Yvonne when you are discharged from the hospital? Why should I notify her? Before you lost your memory, you had been living with her. It's been a year of cohabitation, right? When you go back now, you must surely return to that home. For a long time, he didn't reply. Why is there a thermos here? Is it yours? Why is it so heavy? Gee, the fish soup inside has gone sour. The fish soup I cooked for him, he didn't even open it. Was it cooked by Yvonne for you? You used to love the fish soup she cooked so much that you would always boast about it in front of our brothers. Really? Then I was probably seriously ill before. His loathing words were so clearly heard by me. Too clearly. I pushed open the door and looked at the two people standing in the room. My best friend was obviously a bit embarrassed, but Chase still had no expression on his face. His dark eyes stared at me unpleasantly, as if asking why you are here. Chase, are you feeling better? I pursed my lips and stepped forward to ask him. Forget it. He has lost his memory. How can I be so petty with a patient? He sneered. Then he brushed past me. Why do you hate me so much, Chase? When waiting for the elevator in the corridor, I pulled at his clothes. Does hating a person need a reason? He frowned at me. The doctor said that your perception is a bit chaotic. Have you put the impression of others on me? Think whatever you want. The clothes were pulled out of my hand. When I opened the door, he kept his head down all the time, not knowing what he was thinking. They used to always say that Chase has a cold temperament, but I didn't think so at all. He would always rub his tall nose against my neck and repeatedly call my name. Now, I realize that he is always extremely cold to people who don't interest him. Chase, look at our home. Do you have any impression? I looked at him hopefully. He sighed. Yvonne, don't pretend. Pretend? What am I pretending? We were never affectionate, right? I heard that the affectionate illusion we showed in front of others before was all fabricated by you. Our affection was my fabrication? I widened my eyes and looked at him in disbelief. Who did you hear it from? He lowered his eyes and simply ignored this sentence of mine. Don't listen to others' nonsense, Chase. We were really very. It seemed that the door had been open for too long and the wind rushed in all at once. I shivered. I had never felt our home so cold before. I'm already looking for a house. I'll stay here temporarily these days. I won't disturb you. I hope you won't disturb me either. But his words were even colder. I haven't slept alone for a long time. I'm afraid of the dark, so I always like to leave a small night light by the bedside. I wasn't afraid when Chase slept with me before. The room was pitch black. I hugged my knees and couldn't fall asleep no matter what. In fact, I haven't slept well these days. I always have dreams. All I dream about is him abandoning me. But in reality, it seems that there is not much difference from the dream. Chase is someone who suddenly appeared in my life. Well, it's not really sudden. According to him, I knew him when I was very young. He and his best friend grew up in the welfare home next to my house. I have no impression of him when he was young, but I have a deep impression of him when he grew up. In summer, the tall person bent down, and the mottled shadows swayed on him. He said, I finally found you. When I knew him, he was a music teacher in an elementary school. Later I learned that it was just a profession to cover up what he actually did. He never told me what he was really doing. Although actually, I could guess a little. One day I saw him come back covered in injuries. When I opened the door, he could barely stand. His clothes were all covered in blood, carrying the night wind and the fishy smell of rust. In the end, he was afraid that the blood on his body would stain me. I supported him, panicking and losing all composure. I had never experienced such a thing. I wanted to touch whether that red-black liquid was real, but I touched the wound where the flesh was exposed. That was a world I had never seen before and a place I could never step into in my life. I wanted to call an ambulance, but he grabbed my wrist. He smiled indifferently and asked me what I had for dinner. Let's go to the hospital. Let's go to the hospital, Chase. Hold on a little longer. I wanted to pull him, but I couldn't move him at all. The weight of the man pressed on me, and I was afraid of touching his wound. It's okay, Yvonne. Are you afraid of me? At that time, he was still smiling. Are you afraid of me covered in blood? But I'm afraid that if I don't come to see you now, I'll never see you again. I cried heartbreakingly. Later, his best friend took him to a private clinic. Later, I learned that he deliberately came to see me covered in blood. He understood that no matter how much he tried to hide it, he couldn't hide what he was doing in the end. So he gave me a preventive injection and vaguely told me, my boyfriend may not be a good person. I think maybe he was originally a bad person. It's just that the claws that he once retracted in front of me are now extended. I made breakfast for him. When he came downstairs, it made me feel as if nothing had happened. He didn't lose his memory. He still loves me. But my Chase won't ignore me. Still need to have something to eat in the morning. Seeing that he was about to leave as he opened the door, I quickly stepped forward and grabbed his sleeve. Yvonne. He gently curled up the corner of his mouth. When he smiled, he was still as elegant as ever. When he looked at me against the light, it seemed that I could still find the shadow of his tenderness in the past. If it weren't for the sarcasm in his eyes. You are really persistent. Yes, when did I become like this? Unwilling to let him go, unwilling to admit the fact that he has forgotten me. The little person in my heart is clamoring that it shouldn't be like this, it shouldn't be like this. You said you liked me. I don't believe it. As soon as you open your eyes, you will hate me. His pale knuckles were pried open one by one. The ring he once gave me flashed on my finger for a moment, like dust that no one cares about. After he left, I sat alone on the sofa for a long time. There is a doll on the sofa, a long, unknown creature. I caught it when I went to the amusement park with him. I don't know how many times more money I spent to catch it. When people are impulsive, it's probably like this. I kept shaking it endlessly. He silently inserted game coins beside me. In the end, the result of catching it was not very satisfactory. Actually, I had a premonition that I had spent a lot of money, but he didn't tell me the specific amount. His distinct knuckles pinched the doll and mocked that it was extremely ugly. It's long and takes up space. Later, it was thrown on the sofa. When doing certain things, he would use it to cushion under my waist. I probably have never understood this person named Chase. Or maybe he hid his true self too well in front of me. Chase always indulges me unconditionally. Sometimes I can even find that he spoils me too much. He has never been angry with me or yelled at me. Sometimes I also think that I like him too much. In fact, after my dad left, for me, he is the only one in my world. One night I couldn't fall asleep no matter what. I sent a message asking where he was, and he gave me an address. I admit that when I saw this place at first glance, I was angry. Almost immediately, I sat up from the bed, completely awake, and took a taxi to the destination. The driver even thought I was going to catch a mistress. I don't know if there is a mistress or not, but Chase is waiting for me at the door. The neon signs illuminate the pitch-black night. The noisy singing is clamorous. The moment I saw him, I couldn't ask anything. He came forward and took my hand, saying that you really came. He clearly knew that I would rush over. Yvonne, let me guess. Can't you sleep? I stared silently at the line on his chin, thinking that I was probably fascinated by his eyes shining brightly in the night. Even the obviously noisy darkness became silent. It was on that day that he changed from calling me Yvonne to Yvonne. I think I can't forget. The memories are too strong and deeply engraved on my heart. If there is any water in the world that can make people forget the past, just give me a glass. Don't just give it to him. Just give me a glass. My younger sister called me. She is the child born to my mother and stepfather. Although we are also related by blood, our relationship is probably to the extent that we wish we would never see each other in this life. Sister, I heard that you were dumped by your boyfriend? Her arrogance was evident in the receiver. Does it have anything to do with you? I frowned. No. I'm just greeting my sister. Are you alone again? No one is protecting you anymore, hee hee. My younger sister has never been able to stand seeing me well since she was young. As long as it's something related to me, she wants to take it all away. When Chase was with me, he probably made her suffer a few setbacks. She has held a grudge until now. By the way, sister, I still have one thing to notify you. My coming-of-age ceremony will be held next week. But you probably don't have the nerve to attend, right? After my mother married another man, she completely cut off relations with me. But I don't understand why this half-sister has so much hostility towards me. Obviously, she has lived in the best villa since she was young and attended an international school. When my dad and I were sitting at the table calculating the food expenses, their family was probably sitting in a revolving restaurant enjoying dinner. When I was 18, my dad brought me a cake from the pastry shop at the door. And when she was 18, she had a luxurious coming-of-age ceremony. I always feel that this call from her is somewhat malicious. She had invited Chase in the name of my younger sister before, but Chase frowned and refused. So later, when I saw the photo she sent me in the afternoon, my heart still cooled down a bit. It was a photo of a dinner. Chase and she were both in it. She smiled sweetly and obediently, while Chase's eyes were still icy. Was it at noon today? They had a meal together. I know my younger sister has always been very interested in Chase. But Chase is ostensibly a music teacher. How could they appear at the same dinner? Also, does Chase, who has lost his memory, really know about the shady things he has been doing? When I called Chase, I found that he had blacklisted me. That night, he didn't come back either. I had to call his best friend. Sister-in-law? What's wrong? His best friend didn't blacklist me. It seemed a bit noisy. His best friend is a very tactful person and is probably Chase's most trusted deputy. Chase has blacklisted me. Hey, sister-in-law. Don't be so sad. I told you long ago. Put it down quickly. Why do you still call me sister-in-law? Yes, why? It seemed that he had walked to an open place. The sound of the lighter opening and closing was clear and pleasant. Yvonne, do you know that the most troublesome thing in the world is emotion? What does Chase take you for? Why are you still chasing after him? His words were somewhat blunt and harsh. Sister-in-law, do you want to see Chase? All right, come here. He gave me an address, a place I didn't know. When I took a taxi to the destination, I understood why I didn't know. It was an abandoned construction site. The barking of wild dogs from nowhere rang around. Today's moon is so bright. The black car was parked at the entrance of the unfinished building. The snow-white headlights were like shining on the wilderness. Phaeton, his best friend's car. Chase stood against the light in front of the car. Did he smile at me? I couldn't see clearly. The light was too bright, so that when I saw his figure, my eyes stung. He crooked his finger at me. So, he was really smiling. Yvonne. He called my name. It wasn't so affectionate. His banter made me feel cold all over. If you can climb to the top of this unfinished building, I will come back to you. How about it? I'm terribly afraid of the dark. That unfinished building had no lights. Even though today's moonlight was so bright, the dark corridor was like the deep throat of some monster. Afraid? He leaned forward. The snow-white headlights behind him were reflected in his eyes, indistinguishable. Didn't you say you love me? Prove it to me. When I stepped into the deep and secluded corridor, I wondered if I would die inside. He was clearly teasing me. Why did I still move forward? Am I crazy? Is there something wrong with my brain? There were no handrails on the stairs. The light of my mobile phone was deathly pale. The ground was full of waste wood. It seemed that I saw a black shadow passing by. I was so scared that I couldn't hold my mobile phone. Then I felt my ankle touched by a cold human hand. Only then did I realize it was an abandoned plastic bag. The night wind poured into the corridor without sealed windows. When I looked down, the empty ground seemed like an endless abyss. It was so quiet here that when I stepped on wood or plastic paper, the sound of footsteps could be infinitely amplified. The abandoned stairs had no railings either. I could only walk close to the wall. As I got closer to the roof, the moonlight became brighter and brighter. All was silent and white. I looked down and sure enough, I couldn't see the shadow of that black phaeton anymore. I was deceived. I thought his teasing of me was over. Until I heard voices coming. It seemed that someone was on the phone. That person's voice was very loud. The sound of stepping on the stairs pierced my eardrums one by one. "Brother Chase, I'm on the roof. I don't see anyone? You said there was a reward for me. Where did you go?" It seemed that it was too quiet. The careless tone in his microphone made my heart tremble. "Hiding, right? She likes me so much. She will definitely come up to the top floor." It was Chase's voice. I covered my mouth and didn't dare to make any sound. Hee, then I might have scared her. "Don't hide, big sister. Brother Chase said that you are mine tonight." The footsteps were getting closer. I desperately tried to control my trembling body. My mind was completely blank. At that moment, I realized that Chase hated me. He really hated me. He was not the Chase who was obedient to me before. He wasn't. What on earth did I do that he would treat me like this? I couldn't help but tremble. The man walked around, passed by the cabinet where I was hiding, but didn't find me. "There's really no one, Brother Chase." "No one? Did you look in the cabinet?" "Cabinet? Such a small cabinet can't fit a living person. She has learned dancing." The man stopped in front of me. It seemed that he had touched the handle of the cabinet. I held my breath and rushed out suddenly. He was caught off guard and was really knocked down by me. The mobile phone fell far away, and the faint light flickered on the ground. I stumbled to my feet and ran. He cursed and chased after me. I had never heard such vulgar language a few times in my life. There were many scattered items in the abandoned building. I had no light and couldn't see the road ahead clearly even by moonlight. The man quickly caught up, grabbed my clothes, and slapped me hard. The rough breathing like a wild animal resounded throughout the corridor. There was a warm current flowing through my nostrils. Only then did I realize that I had been slapped and had a nosebleed. Quite wild. I struggled with all my strength in my life, but suddenly found that he didn't hold me anymore. Run? Behind me was a deep ladder without railings. One more step back and I would fall. The mobile phone that had fallen on the ground was picked up by him again. The phone was still connected, and Chase's voice came from the receiver. "What's wrong?" This girl just ran. Now she's been cornered by me." "Oh?" The person on the other end of the phone didn't seem interested either. The man grinned and pressed closer step by step. I really had nowhere to retreat. My fingers were empty. Only then did I realize that the ring that had been on my middle finger had fallen off during the struggle. On the day I was born, the diamond ring that Chase hid in the cake. Strange. It used to fit so tightly. The man opened his arms towards me, and my heel was already hanging in the air. "Tonight's moon is indeed beautiful. On the night my father passed away, it was just as beautiful." When the feeling of weightlessness came, I realized that I had really fallen. Perhaps I didn't really intend to resist to the death. Perhaps I just moved my heel a millimeter more. A violent dull pain in the back of my head pulled me into darkness all at once, dead or not. The icy knuckles stroked my neck. As soon as I regained consciousness, the intense pain in the back of my head made me unable to speak. My legs couldn't move either. It was as if I had no feeling. When light squeezed into my eyes, I realized that it was already morning. I opened my eyes and looked at the person squatting in front of me. Ouch. Could it be that I'd become stupid from the fall? I opened my mouth and called his name. In his eyes was a late autumn scene, a familiar light to me. "Chase, why did you deceive me?" He raised his eyebrows. I stared at him intently. I must look quite terrifying now. Having fallen from who knows which floor, I can't move at all. "Chase, you haven't forgotten anything, right?" His fingers were still on my neck. Unexpectedly, he had the mood to stroke my hair bit by bit. "When did you find out?" "You told that person that I had learned dance. But this matter, I've never mentioned it to anyone other than you." He sneered. "Just because of this?" Strangely, I no longer find him unfamiliar. The deliberately cold him was awkward. Now, in his eyes looking at me are all tenderness and love. Why did you deceive me? I asked him again. Well, because. His fingers gently lifted my chin and wiped away the dirt on the corner of my mouth. It hurt so badly. I have a terminal illness. His gaze was sincere. I stared at the dust rising behind him and wondered if my leg had been broken. It wasn't until his laughter pulled back my thoughts. It seemed that laughing didn't mean he was in a good mood. What's that expression? Don't you believe me anymore? Probably after wiping all the cleanable places on my face, he stepped back and observed me as if looking at something dirty. Well, I lied to you. In fact, I hate you. What else could it be? I've always hated you. I stared at him in silence. Without the effect he wanted, he gently tugged at my hair. Don't you want to ask why? I shook my head. He clicked his tongue. Remember what day it is today? I deliberately chose today to show my cards to you. Actually, I had an answer in my heart, but I didn't dare to connect them. It's the anniversary of your beastly father's death. How could you forget, right? I widened my eyes. My dad is the most important person in my life. He gave up his scientific research path because of me and became a teacher in a junior high school. In the first half of my life, I probably lived only because of him. He was the only color in my black and white memories. Although his salary was not much, he still stubbornly brought me ridiculously expensive marinated beef every Saturday. He bought me whatever I wanted and never got angry with me. Neighbors all said that he was a good-natured old man with some cowardice in his bones. But he was actually described as a beast by Chase. I wanted to scold him back, but as soon as I got excited, several parts of my body ached terribly. Seeing me like this, he raised his eyebrows. He pinched my cheek with his hand and seemed very satisfied with my unwilling expression. Yvonne, how does it feel when someone you care about forgets you? Is it very painful? His hand gradually tightened. My cheeks were sore from being pinched. The day your dear father went crazy, I planned to let you taste this feeling too. That's probably a very long story. There was a little boy and a little girl, playmates in the same orphanage. Their childhood might have flying wild geese in the sunset glow, or perhaps the remaining red of thin clouds. The little girl was very beautiful, lively and lovely, so she was very popular in the orphanage. But she wasn't adopted by any kind-hearted people because before that, someone had reserved her. Yes, she was sold by the black-hearted director. On the day the girl was led away, she who was always smiling inexplicably cried to the boy, as if she had already predicted her tragic future. The boy was pulled by his friends. He also knew that he couldn't snatch back a living person, not to mention that he was still a child who could be easily knocked down by adults at any time. Later, he didn't see her for a long time. To be honest, the orphanage was getting more and more difficult to run. Later, he and his friends escaped from the orphanage one day. Where could two homeless children go? They were chased by inexplicable wild dogs in the heavy rain, beaten by idle hooligans in a remote town, cheated of money, and suffered a lot. But during all these experiences, he secretly hid a glimmer of light in his heart. Later, they finally made a name for themselves in that area. He began to look for her because he remembered that he had said he would protect her for a lifetime. But sometimes fate is so strange. He sent those people to search every alley and street but couldn't find her. However, when he was strolling casually, he met her. She doesn't seem as beautiful as before, but it doesn't matter. He can still take her back, but she doesn't want to go with him. He wiped his dusty short-sleeved shirt, thinking it was because he was too rustic. But the girl just pushed him away blindly and told him to go. He didn't understand, but he didn't want to force her either. Just a little worried, he secretly followed her. Then, he saw the most unforgettable scene in his life. The girl walked up to a secluded room and began to get on all fours. After a while, a man came. The man gently touched the girl's hair and said with a smile, "So good." That man was the one who bought the girl in the first place. He almost vomited. He rushed over and punched the man in the face. Teenagers at this age always have a fierce energy. The man was almost beaten to the ground by him. He beat the man half to death, pulled the girl's hand and ran. The girl was crying all the way. Chase, I'm not clean anymore. I'm so dirty. I'm so dirty. He could only comfort the girl over and over again, saying it's okay. If the sky falls, there's Big Brother to hold it up. However, the sky really did fall. They were so young that they couldn't compete with that man at all. During that time, they hid everywhere. In the end, the girl was still taken away. He desperately tried to chase after the girl and wanted to rush out and fight with that man. In the end, his friends held him back firmly. As long as the green hills remain, there will always be firewood. In short, he and his friends hid again. The dormant days are always long and tormenting. Sometimes he would secretly go to see the girl. The girl wasn't dead, but it was better if she were dead. It was during this time that he met Yvonne. In his eyes, Yvonne should have died long ago. Can you imagine? After that man tortured the girl brutally, he turned around and could smile brightly at his own daughter. Yes, that man is Yvonne's father. What was Yvonne doing when the girl was lying on the bed dying? Yvonne was enjoying extremely careful love. What was Yvonne doing when the girl was crying in agony? Yvonne was doing math problems in a warm little room. What was Yvonne doing when the girl was finally tortured and collapsed? Yvonne was admitted to college, proud and arrogant. Yvonne, her name probably makes him burn with anger. Such a bright name doesn't deserve her. That's probably what he thinks. Later, he finally rescued the girl. And he deliberately chose the day of Yvonne's birthday to end Yvonne's father. However, the girl he rescued went crazy. She didn't remember who he was. She kept shaking nonstop when seeing anyone and shouted loudly from time to time. He thought it wasn't enough. That man deserved to die. But how could Yvonne, the naturally bastard's daughter, be any better? He wanted his daughter to suffer like this too. So, one day, he broke into her world. This is probably the story before I met him. There was never a sweet love. No one had ever saved me. My younger sister was right. I have always been alone. I once thought their world was far away from me. It turns out to be so close that I have already stepped in with one foot. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing either. The light seems very strong, extremely strong, so that I can't see the things in front of me. I can only hear someone's voice. Deep and with an indescribable tenderness. Like the slowly flowing moonlight. Why are you sleeping here? It seems that a coat was put on my shoulder. The cool smoke and the unmelting fragrance of cedar swayed and overflowed into my nose. Someone brushed aside my bangs. Only then did I look up and squint at him. The hanging incandescent light made it not so easy for me to adapt to the light. It seemed that my eyes had been pressed on my arm for a long time and were somewhat numb and painful. You're back. I opened my mouth, but found my voice terrifyingly hoarse. Caught a cold? Your voice is so hoarse. He raised his eyebrows and looked at me gently. Today he is wearing the turtleneck sweater I picked for him in the mall last time. It makes him seem inexplicably more refined. Suddenly, his forehead was pressed against mine. His suddenly enlarged face startled me. His eyes were covered with a layer of amber light by the twilight of the lamp. I could even count his eyelashes clearly. No fever. He said softly and moved a little away from me. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. I had a nightmare. I frowned and said to him, tightening his coat even more. He was unpacking the cake opposite me. Only then did I realize that he had brought cake home. Today is my birthday. What dream? Don't remember. Then how do you know it's a nightmare? Because it's very sad. He looked at me gently, with a long-considered seriousness and persistence. Then you must remember it well. I won't let go of anyone who makes our Yvonne sad. I propped my chin and watched him cut the cake. The plastic knife was not easy to control, but supported by his beautiful knuckles, it was also neat and pleasing to the eye. Chase, you only talk. Yes, I only talk because there is simply no chance to show off. He smiled helplessly. A perfect corner of the cake was cut off. Just as I was about to take it, the plastic knife with chocolate made into the shape of A came in front of me. Don't you like eating chocolate? I bit off that piece of chocolate on the tip of the knife. Cocoa butter and overly sweet and greasy cream all stirred up in my mouth at once. After eating the chocolate, he still didn't mean to let me do it myself. Strawberries, cream, cake. He scooped it up and handed it to me. I had to eat it with the spoon in his hand. Are you still playing the games between couples now? I complained. He laughed. Just play. There was not much light at night. The lamp on the dining table didn't work after being used for a long time. It was dim. It seemed that he found it very pleasant to feed me cake. His eyebrows and eyes were stained with a smile. After he fed me a whole cake, I felt a bit too sweet and greasy. I seemed to have forgotten a very important thing. What thing? He propped his chin and rubbed his thumb across the corner of my mouth. Wedding ring. The wedding ring that he hid in the cake. I suddenly stood up, and even the table and chair made a violent collision sound. The pendant lamp swayed. I backed away in horror, but he didn't move there. I couldn't see his expression. Everything stopped moving. Then a cracking sound rang out, like solidified ice cracking little by little. I couldn't breathe. Someone was clasping my neck. I struggled violently and woke up suddenly, coughing desperately as if I was about to cough out my lungs. Looking up in a mess, I met his eyes. This time it's not a dream. It's reality. Because those eyes are not gentle at all. There is only a wild deep pool of blood red. Are you awake? Chase's knuckles were still clasping my neck. In the dream, he had gently wiped the corner of my mouth with his finger. A few strands of my hair hung down, wobbly blocking my sight. I barely looked around. It was still a pale wall. These days, I have been sleeping and waking up and sleeping again. When I was asleep, I always dreamed of memories related to him. When I woke up, he was pinching my neck. It was so uncomfortable. What's that expression on your face? He frowned in dissatisfaction and forcibly tried to make the corner of my mouth curl up in a smile. I was a little hurt by him. Strange. Why does he want to see me smile? I don't know if I'm too hungry or too thirsty. I let him do as he pleases while looking up. Anyway, it's been like this these days. I'm already a little used to it. What on earth does he want to do to me? He picked me up and found a doctor to sew up my wound. At first, I thought he was going to make me experience everything that girl had suffered. But these days, he just wakes me up from my sleep occasionally. So am I. I seem to like sleeping very much. Obviously, it's not a very comfortable environment. Obviously, there are still so many things weighing on me. I can actually sleep with peace of mind. He is very dissatisfied with me like this. I am already so obedient, but he still looks at me with a fierce look. Something sharp and cool pressed against the back of my neck. I subconsciously avoided it and then heard him laugh. Are you afraid? I looked up at him. What's this? The syringe was moving on my skin, bringing some sharp stinging pain. It was like being pressed against by the fangs of some fierce beast. I shrank even tighter. Guess. Something for euthanasia? Huh? A rather derisive snort. You think if I want to kill you, I would use such a gentle method? The syringe was inserted into the skin. The pain made all my nerves tremble. Was it because his technique was not good or the needle was especially thick? I had never felt so much pain when getting an injection before. After giving me the injection, he stood up and looked down at me. I hope you don't sleep all day. It's so comfortable. My purpose of torturing you hasn't been achieved at all. Actually, it's uncomfortable when sleeping. My head is in a daze. I can't wake up. And my dreams are all filled with pictures of being with him before. The door was closed. Looking at the suddenly suppressed light, I thought he really knew how to oppress me. I hate the dark the most. In the past, I could escape these by sleeping. But today, I couldn't fall asleep no matter what. I hugged my knees and wondered what he had injected me with. In TV shows, gangsters and the like would control hostages by injecting drugs. Thinking in this way, I was a little scared. My fear of darkness has reached an extraordinary degree. When Chase found out for the first time, he was full of disbelief. Little kid? You still turn on the light when you sleep, huh? I glared at him. I'm just afraid of the dark. Some people are afraid of bugs and some people are afraid of mice. I'm afraid of the dark. Can't I? Yes, yes, yes. From now on, I will be your light. Wherever you go, I will shine there. Okay? So you see, a man's mouth is full of lies. A room without a trace of light is like the mouth of a giant beast, or like it will give birth to countless strange and grotesque demons. I curled up myself, but still felt that there were invisible people standing around me. I don't know how long it took before I fell asleep in a daze. I didn't dream this time. When I woke up, I was extremely awake. I even had the strength to stand up from the bed. But just after standing for a while, he pushed the door open and came in. He had a morning light that didn't belong to him. He looked up at me with a face full of incomprehension. I don't know what kind of look I should use to look at him anymore. I want to escape and seek help, but I still can't find a way. In this airtight room, only when he opens the door does a little light leak in. In fact, sometimes, when you are thirsty, hungry, and in pain, you don't even know which side to seek help from first. Moreover, he doesn't seem like he will help me. He will just look at me sarcastically. You woke up early today? It seems that the medicine is quite effective. Medicine? Could it be the injection he gave me yesterday? This lunatic. I look at him with pursed lips. He just slightly twitches the corner of his mouth. What would you like to eat? Do I have a choice? When I uttered the first sound, he frowned. What's wrong with your throat? Of course, it's because I haven't had a drink of water for a long time. He went out for a while. When he came back, he was carrying several insulated bags. When opened, there were several cooked dishes. I don't know if I should call it ironic. They are all my favorites. I silently scoop up porridge and drink. But he stands not far away, watching me eat with his arms folded. I don't need to sense it to know that his gaze is too intense. In the airtight room, even the air seems to flow sluggishly. It's so quiet that only the sound of me eating can be heard. I ate a lot. I don't know if it's because I'm too hungry or... I always feel that this is my last meal. Are you full? A voice without much emotion rings above my head. Then my chin is forcibly lifted. His finger brushes across my jaw. There are several scabbed wounds there. He rubs it. Come on, make a sound. I open my mouth and find that it's so difficult to even make a sound. TSK, forget it. Don't talk anymore. Then, he throws a piece of clothing that he brought along with the insulated bag to me. Change into it. The fabric is as smooth as silk. The cutting craftsmanship is quite exquisite. I change into the clothes in front of him. He doesn't move away. What can I do? Do I have the right to drive him away? The design of the evening dress is rather bold in some places. It's the first time I wear this kind of clothes and I'm a bit uncomfortable. But his gaze is too piercing. He turns my shoulder and makes me turn around. He opens something and applies it on my back. Is it concealer? Most of the back of the evening dress is hollowed out. His finger slides across the end of my spine. When the paste is applied, it brings a coolness. He then covers all the wounds on my face with concealer. He steps back a few steps and looks at me like he's appraising an object. Then he raises his eyebrows. Yvonne, do you understand? Even in your current state of being on the verge of death and pale, there will still be people who like you. What does that mean? After 30 or 40 minutes, I finally understand. He takes me. The car stops in front of a nightclub full of bright lights and bustling activities. The luxury cars coming and going everywhere indicate the noble status of the guests inside. My wrist is pinched by him. Although I remember that you seem unable to drink, but tonight, it's going to be hard on you. In the VIP room filled with toasts and cups clinking, I can't see clearly what the people toasting look like anymore. I only know that I am passively forced to drink bottle after bottle of liquor. My chaotic mind can't form even half a thought. Even my vision is swaying, colorful and surging. I thought that finally I went out and I had a chance to seek help. But Chase watches me closely. Those malicious people just look at me like watching a joke. Only then do I know why he dares to bring me out so openly. I don't know how I walked out. My feet have long lost their strength. The night breeze rushes into my skin all at once. I shiver violently. My waist is hooked. The tall buildings in the distance are still brightly lit, but the night is endless. The things in my stomach are like a ball of fire burning. The place I can see is clearly prosperous but full of scars. Is it over? I ask him. Is this torture over? Or is it just the beginning? I can't see anything clearly and can't even stand steadily. Alcohol is probably really not a good thing. So much so that all the resentment I have accumulated these days erupts. What did I do wrong? Or is it that I was born to pay for his sins? I look at his eyes vaguely. I can't see anything clearly because there are tears. The light of the street lamp is elongated. He is clearly the one I love deeply. He is clearly the one who gave me salvation. Now, why does this chase only make me feel disgusted? The night wind sweeps across people's skin without restraint. The heart in my chest beats wildly. People always rebound when they have nothing left. I am the same. I want to drag him to hell together. Hate also rises from the bottom of my heart at that time. But I can't push him away. He reaches out and pries apart my fingers that are holding his collar one by one. How many times have I looked into those black eyes? Strangely, 3 years is like a dream, like a grand drama. They are all actors. Only I am the audience who is dragged onto the stage and toyed with. I don't understand. I don't know anything. Is this also a mistake? The tree shadows sway noisily. The garage is silent. Until he kisses me. Probably for 1 second or 2 seconds. I hate the extremely familiar touch. I also hate that he knows how to please me. I pushed him away desperately. He swayed twice. In the pitch-black eyes, nothing can be seen clearly. It's not over, Yvonne. We are just beginning. The hoarse voice carried emotions that I could never clearly distinguish. He locked my hand and pushed me into an approaching white car. There was a very heavy impact. When the car door closed, the car even shook. Before I could figure out what was going on, my shoulder outside was grabbed. The strange touch made me shiver in fright. We haven't seen each other for long, do you still remember me? Miss. But my chin was turned over. The man's eyes were long and narrow. Only the ring on his finger made my chin ache a little. I shrank back. I remember him. Just now, Chase and I toasted him. What does it mean? What's your name? He asked me. With my back against the door handle, I stared at him and shook my head. The gift Chase gave me this time is a bit naughty. In an instant, it was as if my mind had been struck hard. I was sold by him again. It's not over. My hell has just begun. Last time was not enough. He wants to inflict all the harm that girl suffered on me. This is only the first step. The car was speeding on the highway. The scarlet light outside the window flashed by. This dress of mine is not conservative at all. Wherever he touches me can cause me to shudder. The more you struggle, the more excited I will be. However, I am very satisfied with the gift Chase gave me this time. He really understands my preferences more and more. I kicked him. He raised his hand and grabbed my ankle. The high heels were easily taken off by him. The rough touch went from bottom to top. My heart was pounding. Alcohol played an improper role again at this moment. At the same time, my whole body seemed to fall into an ice cellar. I struggled violently. It seemed that I hit the front seat. The car shook. His eyes instantly turned cold, and his hand quickly grabbed my neck. Try moving again? The tightening 5 fingers made it difficult for me to breathe. My hand instinctively wanted to pull his palm away, but he didn't move at all. He didn't let go until my vision began to blur. I gasped for breath. The feeling of oxygen rushing into my lungs instantly was not good. I retched a few times and looked at him breathlessly. There are always people who like to ask for trouble. Yes, there are always people who like to ask for trouble. Sometimes I always think that in such a situation, just give up. Letting others manipulate me may not be a bad ending for someone like me who is in the quagmire. It might be better to die. If I die, I will be liberated. The sticky touch slid up my thigh again. I looked at him indifferently. Like a hand wrapped in a fishy smell, it pulled me into the darkness little by little. I opened my eyes. It seemed that I exerted force suddenly and kicked him in a certain part. He opened his eyes wide in pain and released his restraint on me. I desperately pulled the door handle. The speed of the car was not slow. Although the driver stepped on the brakes suddenly, when I rolled down, the close contact between my skin and the ground still caused a burning pain. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that the car had stopped. There was no one on the street late at night. I had to stand up and run staggeringly. My shoes had long been lost. Sometimes there seemed to be some stones on the ground stabbing into the soles of my feet. My vision was shaking. There was only one consciousness in my mind telling me to keep running forward, until I tripped over some steps and knelt down straight. Even the night was silent. I looked at the empty sky blankly. The street lamp flickered alone. The puddle reflected the little remaining light. Suddenly, I felt that my entire chest was filled with some helpless emotion. How long has it passed? How long? No one chased after me. There was nothing. Behind me, the dark alley entrance extended into the invisible distance. It seems that I am no longer afraid of the dark. Never again. I didn't dare to go home for fear of being discovered by Chase. In the following days, I stayed in a relatively hidden hotel. I began to suffer from insomnia all night long. As soon as I closed my eyes, various scenes related to Chase would pop up. Some were real, and some were my imaginations. I don't love him anymore. Even my hatred has become blurred. Chase may not be unable to find me. I think, perhaps, his revenge has ended here. That's good. Just like this, the name Chase never appeared in my life again. He and his best friend disappeared without a trace. Has my life returned to normal? I don't know. I visited my dad at the cemetery. I also rummaged through the warehouse in my hometown. When I saw a set of torture instruments he hid on the second floor of the basement, my heart still beat hard. The tide of the sea swallowed up all my questions. I opened my mouth but had nowhere to start. I used to think that once he was gone, he was gone. Looking ahead, life was full of hope. Only now do I know that the traces left by things that have passed will always be there, ugly and unforgettable. If this is Chase's revenge, then he has probably succeeded. I am not as miserable as that girl, and I have truly experienced what Chase once experienced. Loneliness? Anger? Despair or pain? For me, the only benefit of this matter is probably that I finally discovered the truth of this so-called love between me and Chase. I will never be that clown kept in the dark again. Later, I started working again and accepted new people. My younger sister still bothered me from time to time. But from her probing tone, I could sense that she had also lost contact with Chase. The doctor said that I could try to treat those years as a dream. Since I can't forget it, I can fabricate it as something that never existed and never happened. Anyway, I can't step into that place twice. That's it. What was I thinking in the second before I was suddenly knocked unconscious on my way home from work? I was thinking, here we go again. I'm involved in their world again. Sure enough, once you step into the quagmire, you can never get out clean. What greeted my eyes was a glaring paleness. Why is the sheet so cold? I don't know. It's as if my body will never emit heat again. The door was opened, and I looked at him quietly. Does your head hurt? His voice was so gentle that it seemed unreal to me. I asked them to bring you here. They might have misunderstood my meaning and were a bit too rough. He took a few steps towards me. I subconsciously shrank back. Chase. His fragmented name was squeezed out of my words. What else do you want? The man's pupils were very black, like an endless abyss. When he looked at me, I always felt that the chaotic ink color would swallow me up all at once. What do I want? I haven't figured it out yet. The man's hand gently held my chin, and the icy touch seeped into my skin inch by inch. I turned my head aside. He laughed. A melodious wind blew in through the crack of the door. I stared closely at his back as he closed the door and left. It was as if the memories that I had finally buried were reuniting. The broken pictures became more intense with his arrival. I jumped out of bed and looked around. A very simple room with a bed, a lamp, and a table. There was no window. The door of the room was a password lock. The four pale walls faced me directly. After a while, he came back carrying a thermos. Do you want me to eat well and then help you receive guests again? I looked at him directly. The chill on his body made me shiver involuntarily. I really don't know what kind of expression to use to look at him. Sometimes, I don't even bother to waste my hatred on him. Eat. He just said softly. I can't eat. I glared at him. These are all your favorites. Can't you eat them? He raised his eyebrows slightly. I can't eat when I see your face. I never thought that I would say this sentence in front of him. Obviously, he still holds my life in his hands. Obviously, he can easily break my neck. He was also stunned for a moment. I thought he would take the food away directly. At the very least, he would starve me for a few meals. But he turned around and really walked out of the room. In the empty room, the fragrance of the food rushed into my nostrils. Isn't it a bit ironic? I still remember the fish soup I cooked for him. It has gone bad. I held the disposable chopsticks in my hand and stared at them. After hesitating for a few seconds, I broke them. The broken wooden slivers were uneven. I pressed them hard on my wrist and rubbed vigorously. But it was useless. I couldn't cut it open. I just scratched the skin. The red marks were a bit scary. But the door was suddenly pulled open. I was stunned and suddenly hugged by him. My wrist was tightly held. The man's smell was like a desolate smoke of war. In this position, I don't know if he is hugging me or strangling me. I felt a little pain in my bones. I opened my mouth but didn't want to make a sound. My head turned slowly. I want to escape from this embrace quickly. I struggled with all my strength, but this time he held me tightly. In the end, I couldn't struggle anymore. I looked up at the open crack of the door. Let me go. My voice seemed a bit hoarser than I had imagined. Let me go. I don't want to entangle with you anymore. But a deep voice sounded above my head. Chase's palm gently lifted my hair, so gentle that it sent a shudder through me. Only this, I won't promise you. I think Chase is sick. I can't figure out the reason for him to do such a thing. That day when he gave me to that boss, I already thought he wouldn't care about me anymore. But then he caught me again. In the room without windows, when the lights were turned off, darkness wrapped me layer by layer. I stared wide-eyed at the ceiling, but soon my head became groggy. Am I too tired? Or, is it a problem with the food? The only fragmented thoughts left in my mind. The last picture I saw was probably the white light outside leaking in as he pushed open the door. I had a very long dream. It was the days when I had just met him and my father had passed away. At the funeral, there was a light drizzle. There were many people who came to mourn. But I had already cried until I couldn't squeeze out any more tears. The evening wind in early winter was cold to the bone. The thin light of the setting sun quietly fell on the mountain. I numbly felt the passage of time until a corner of the curtain of the morning hall was lifted. Chase is such a person, it's hard to ignore his existence. The man was wearing a black windbreaker. His deep black pupils were hazy. In the white curtain of rain, it seemed that not a single drop fell on him. I stared at him in a daze. At that time, our relationship was probably not very close yet. The wind and rain suddenly swept into the curtain. In front of my father's body, I thought slowly, wondering what I should say to him, until I suddenly fell into an embrace. In fact, his windbreaker was very cold, but the emotions that were hard to soothe in my soul suddenly surged. The surging thoughts pulled at my nerves all the time. I grabbed the hem of his clothes, and my tears were all soaked in his collar. I clearly felt that I would no longer be sad, but just because of his embrace, all my bottom lines were shattered. The shadow-like smoke disappeared very quickly. When I turned my head, I had already arrived at my former home. At that time, I had established a relationship with him for a period of time. On a rainy afternoon, I was sitting on the sofa revising my thesis while he leaned beside me playing with a game controller. The rain was beating on the window lattice, and the coolness couldn't reach inside the room. The pictures on the TV were in a mess. I couldn't write any words. But he was playing intensely. I sighed and watched the game he was playing. But before I had watched for a while, he pressed pause. The warm light indoors made his pupil color appear lighter. It was very easy for people to be immersed in it. As if by a strange impulse, I held my breath. What's wrong? Suddenly he laughed out loud and abruptly approached me. Do you want me to kiss you? Some rather explicit words easily made my ears turn red. I turned my head away. His hand gently pinched my chin. The movement was not very gentle. He casually took a throw pillow and placed it under my waist, then leaned over it and kissed me. The heavy rain deafened my ears. Just like I had no choice. I numbly watched this scene, and in my heart surged the emotion of pushing him away fiercely, but I was powerless. Memories are like a sticky quagmire, desperately trying to tear me apart completely. When I opened my eyes in the morning, I saw the second person I least wanted to see in my life. Sister-in-law, don't look at me with that kind of look. I'm not your sister-in-law. I tried to see something in the eyes of his best friend, but I couldn't. He even smiled very happily, as if hoping for chaos. Do you know? The first time I saw Chase, he took back the gift he had given away. I was stunned for a moment. He swayed his body. Do you think? You don't think that you could escape that day really by yourself, do you? And, on that day at the construction site, Xiaowu could have violated you but didn't. Why? Because Chase drove the car back again. I grinned. I don't know if this can still be called a smile. Then should I thank him? His best friend waved at me and took out a dagger from his cuff and pressed it against my neck. His tone suddenly changed. The person who was laughing and joking just a second ago now really looked like a vicious criminal. I can kill you because Chase can't have weaknesses. I can also not kill you, unless... On the fourth day of being imprisoned by Chase in this room, I have become familiar with his daily routine. Sleeping pills will be put in the water given to me every day. This is what his best friend told me. So I secretly poured out the water. Sure enough, that night I didn't feel sleepy at all. I forced myself to keep my eyes open until I heard the click when the door opened. The man's footsteps drew nearer. His cold fingers touched my forehead. It was probably a long time ago. I remember his fingers were always warm. He seemed to stand by my bed for a very long time. Until I heard his soft breathing. There was always the smell of pine snow that never melted on him, like a sober depravity, and also like a well-disguised warmth. At the moment when our lips and teeth touched, I finally couldn't stand it and turned my face away. In the darkness, when I opened my eyes, I just happened to look into his eyes. I had traced his eyes, brow bones, nose bridge, and lips many times. How ridiculous. That was the person I had been longing for, but now it is a nightmare that I avoid. Poured out the water? You're really not obedient. His voice was hazy in the night, with an obscure hoarseness. Don't touch me. I glared at him fiercely. Hate me? In the desolate and lonely darkness, he asked me softly, but his fingers intentionally or unintentionally lifted the end of my hair. But what can I do? I don't want to let you go anymore. I found that in the days when you were not around, I would always think of you. In the end, I don't even know if I was playing with you or playing with myself. Yvonne, I can treat you like before. I found my voice. I don't know if it was after 1 minute or 2 minutes. Do you mean that we start over? Was my expression too pale, or was my words filled with trembling? Forget all the previous things? Don't you think it's too absurd? The person in front of me seemed to have expected my expression. But I couldn't bear the abyss covered in mud all over me. I didn't want to see the emotion called remorse in his eyes. It disgusted me. Don't touch me, Chase. From now on, don't touch me. I changed to a room with a window. I can also move freely in the villa, but I can't walk out of the yard door because there are people guarding. I once stood in the yard and analyzed my geographical location. Surrounded by mountains on all sides, it is an extremely remote place. Chase will come 3 times a week. He has become extremely obedient to me. That kind of pleasing is something I never had before. I threw a vase at him. The splashing glass scratched the corner of his forehead. He didn't get angry. I poured out the meal he brought in front of him. He just smiled helplessly and asked me what I wanted to eat and asked the aunt to make it for me. I said, I want to play the piano. The next day, a brand new grand piano appeared in the living room. He seemed to have no bottom line and even became a little pitiful. Pitiful? It seems I'm not in a position to say that about him. I am the one who is truly pitiful. At the end of autumn, Chase pushed open the door of the villa. I had fallen asleep leaning against the sofa. When he came to hold me, I struggled free. Why didn't you go sleep in the room? Forgot. I picked up the fallen book and walked towards the room without looking back. My wrist was grabbed from behind by the man, and I stopped. Today is my birthday. Spend it with me. It seems that today is his birthday. I haven't looked into his eyes like this for a long time. His eyes are like a deep, devouring pool. There seems to be something I can't see clearly. But that day, I couldn't get angry for some reason. The birthday cake was brought by him. Of course, I didn't have a birthday gift for him. A lamp was hanging from the ceiling, and the faint light couldn't fill the whole room. Yvonne, this is our 6th year together. 6th year. My throat was inexplicably bitter. The sweet and greasy smell of cream lingered in my nose and couldn't be dispelled. When I called his name, he suddenly looked up at me. Chase, how many more 6 years do you want to torture me? Obviously it was warm light, but it was so cold in his pupils. He just looked at me for a long time and then said, let's light the candles. So the flickering candle flame lit up. I remembered every birthday I had spent with him before. Memories suddenly tore at my mind, about happily preparing birthday gifts for him in the past, and about every cake I made by hand for him. I suddenly stood up, and the flame flickered because of my movement. I won't spend it with you anymore. I left this sentence and turned to walk up the stairs. It was very quiet behind me. I didn't know if he was looking at my back. I just felt that every place here made me suffocate. I didn't want to see his face, nor did I want to recall what happened 2 or 3 years ago. I think, probably, the autumn night is too cold. I huddled up, but it still wasn't enough. When the door was pushed open, I was still hugging my arms and shivered. Chase squatted in front of me. The not-so-bright light from the living room leaked in behind him. He looked at me helplessly as I stared at him firmly. If he wanted to trap me, I couldn't struggle free at all. So I simply bit his shoulder in one breath. He seemed to feel no pain. Yvonne, no one will bully you anymore. They have disappeared from this world today. No wonder. When he entered the door today, although his expression was normal, he couldn't hide the faint smell of rust on his body. But doesn't he know that he is the one who thrust the knife deeply into my body? In this world, the person I most hope to disappear is you. I said this sentence with a tight throat, almost gnashing my teeth. His fingers slipped into my hair. I don't know if he was smiling. Yvonne, if you want to say hurtful words, can't you say them? It feels like it's the season of autumn rain. The wind pierces people's bones bitterly. It's like those days that can never come back. They all go to see their souls. It turns out that they are already full of scars. Late autumn. In cities farther north, by this time, the temperature has dropped sharply. There is underfloor heating in the house, so I don't need to worry about being cold. For 3 meals a day, there is an aunt who comes to cook. She also cleans the house. I don't have to do anything. Occasionally, I will flip through the books in the study because the types are all quite interesting to me. There is a landline phone in the living room. Only he can call in, but I can't call out. Look, while we are talking, the phone call comes. The tune of fire.I echoes throughout the living room. Obviously there is no noise, and the tune can be said to be gentle. My heart still beats like a drum in due time. I picked up the phone, and the person on the other end sounded urgent. Yvonne, there is a secret passage in the study. Push aside the 3rd book from the left in the 2nd row of the bookshelf. The password is your birthday. Run out from there. Run as far as you can. Don't say you know me. Hide for a while first. It seemed that I had been silent for too long. His breathing slowed down a bit. Even, a little cautiously, hello? I am very safe now. I slowly found my own voice, but it was too noisy in the receiver. The noisy noise stimulated my eardrum, and I subconsciously tightened the receiver. Are you very safe? He seemed to have completely stopped. Even his breathing was much more restrained. But I heard gunshots and the sound of people running. Where are you? He asked me. In your villa. Who is with you? The police. Probably a chaotic silence. Suddenly he laughed. Forget it. As long as you are fine. The police have known my movements 7 days ago. Besides Huangli, you betrayed me too, right? Heh, but since you have never been on my side, it's not considered betrayal, right? In fact, on the day I fell out of the car, I rushed into the nearest police station late at night and incoherently described to the policeman on duty what had happened to me. But I could never find Chase again. In the boundless night, he was like dissipating fog, without a trace. I have no evidence to accuse Chase. Not to mention accusation, it's even difficult to find him. He disappeared overnight. There was no trace related to him at all the places he stayed. Until one day his best friend found me and said she wanted to turn herself in. I used her to successfully grasp the clues of Chase, and then was found by him. The police, through my clue and the testimony of Chase's best friend, successfully found him. His best friend said Chase couldn't go far. For a woman, still the daughter of an enemy, those who are emotionally involved repeatedly will sooner or later fall into the gutter. I might as well go to prison. Making up for mistakes might delay my death by a few years. This is his exact words. In fact, there are already policemen sitting around me, all hoping that I can extract some words from Chase through this call. Chase, where are you? I asked him. He chuckled lightly. The background noise was so loud that I couldn't hear clearly. The policemen beside me were using instruments to detect his location. What did you say? I said Yvonne told them not to waste their efforts looking. It's too late. A mottled scene and noisy sounds stretched everything long. It seemed that no one was running and no one raised a gun. The world was extremely quiet at a certain moment. For the first time, the human voice in the microphone was so clear. I won't accompany you home for dinner tonight. He had actually said such words to me many, many times before. Because he was always very busy with work and couldn't go home at night. I still froze for a moment at a certain time. Then the roaring explosion rushed into my eardrums. There was a buzzing in my ears. For a long time, I couldn't hear a sound at all. It was like a plucked string that couldn't stop. I looked at the faces of the people in front of me in confusion, perhaps broken or panicked. It wasn't until I felt liquid sliding across my chin that I realized that my ear was bleeding. I had such an extremely quiet time to recall, unable to hear anyone's voice. The first time I met him, he pushed open the door of the room. Autumn rain streaked across his clothes and the evening wind was wrapped in his long coat. He called my name as if he had said it before many times. For a long time, I couldn't hear a sound at all. It was like a plucked string that couldn't stop. I looked at the faces of the people in front of me in confusion, perhaps broken or panicked. It wasn't until I felt liquid sliding across my chin that I realized that my ear was bleeding. I had such an extremely quiet time to recall, unable to hear anyone's voice. The first time I met him, he pushed open the door of the room. Autumn rain streaked across his clothes and the evening wind was wrapped in his long coat. He called my name as if he had said it before many times.